open the meeting with persons that were here for the first convention. Please stand and remain standing. What addicts were here for the first convention, We Grow with Love? Please stand up. And remain standing. Where is that? Page
90. I'm Mike, I'm a recovering addict. Tell yourself, just for today, my thoughts will be on my recovery, living and enjoying life without the use of drugs. I will have faith in somebody at Narcotics Anonymous who believes in me and wants to help me in my recovery. I will have a program I will try to follow to the best of my ability. Through Narcotics Anonymous, I will try to get a better perspective on my life. I will be unafraid of my thoughts. It will be on my new association of people who are not using and following the new way of life. So long as I follow that way, I have nothing to fear.
Thanks, Mike. Members of the North Central Indiana area of Narcotics Anonymous welcomes you to the 5th annual We Grow with Love convention. We'd like to thank you for joining with us in this celebration of recovery. We are deeply grateful to NA and find great joy in being able to express our gratitude here with you, our family. In NA, we are certain that when we come together to share our lives and our love with each other, a miracle happens. Our recovery takes hard work, courage, and commitment. Those are the things that carry us through as we seek the spiritual growth that comes from working the 12 steps. Never alone. We do this together and for each other, knowing that we need each other, because more than anything else, we grow with love. The preface to the basic text begins, "The full fruit of the labor of love lives in the harvest, and that always comes in its right season. For us, our season has come." Boy, I like that. Oh, yeah. Now we got a meeting. Julie, I'm still an addict. Our speaker tonight is Jackie M. from Buffalo, New York. She's a real neat lady. I'm just going to say something briefly because I do have someone who would like to introduce Jackie formally, but I want to say a couple of things. What I want to say is I think Jackie's a real neat lady, but at one point in my recovery, it was kind of a down low time, and a close friend of mine in NA offered me a tape, of Jackie, and I've never listened to a tape that touched me like that one, and not since, because it was there's a whole lot of her story that's like my story, but the most important thing is that she shares from the heart, and that's what got me, that's what I heard, and meeting her, and she's the same way, off the tape, in person, and so thank you for being here, and I'm going to introduce Ben to introduce Jackie.
I'm an addict named Ben. Hi, family. Hi, Ralph. I met Jackie, first of all, I met her on tape once in 1990, and I was the program chair of our area convention. And I've been knowing Jackie for about 6 years, and I know she's a traveling addict, and we've been all over the place together at times, and we share a lot. And I know one thing about her is just that with her message, there's a lot of feelings and also a lot of identification, because we all been through ups and downs in recovery through this road, and we've shared a lot of our insanity together and a whole lot of our hope too. And I'm sure if you have an open mind and an open heart, you'll get a lot out of her message. Jackie M. from Buffalo, New York.
I'm an addict. My name's Jackie. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for a very, very beautiful weekend. I want to thank each person that just hugged me or said hello to me while I was here this weekend. I want to thank each person who found some time to spend a little time with me this weekend. I want to thank this convention committee for considering me, for asking me to come. It gives me once again the opportunity to serve Narcotics Anonymous and to serve God. And most of all, I want to thank God, as always, for giving me a purpose in life. I especially want to thank God these days for the awareness that He has smiled on me, that He has blessed me so much. I especially want to thank Him these days for allowing me to not only to free me from the trap, but to allow this addict, this human being, this woman, the opportunity to learn how to stay out of the trap, to learn how to not sniff around the trap, trying to come up with a plan of how I can get in and get out without getting caught, but actually learn how to recognize what the trap is for me. And I thank Him because I know it's only by God's grace that I'm here and that I'm not only just clean, but I feel like today my life has quality and meaning. And I know that's only because of the gift that He gave me by bringing me to Narcotics Anonymous a little over 11 and a half years ago. And I thank Him for that. And I thank all of you for being here and being part of this for me. I really don't even know what I want to say or how I want to start. I just know that I do what I always do before I'm asked to speak. Before I speak, I try to find some time by myself, and I have certain things that I read and I pray, and my prayer is always that God would just give me the words. And I want to say that last night Ralph kind of took the words from me when he said that to the effect about he's never shared in a place like this. And I walked in here last night already thinking about how I felt about being in the place that I was going to be standing up here the following night. And my first thought was, I don't think I've ever spoken any place where there was sand and gravel on the floor. And then I remembered that I have. I've been blessed to be asked to speak at some NA campouts, and there were tents and grass and everything. And I sat on a picnic bench, on a picnic table, because I'm kind of short, so I had to sit up on the table to speak. But I just really want to say that this is a very humbling feeling, a very awesome feeling to be in this building. I'm looking around and I can see all the gifts and the talents and the artistry, gifts that God has given somebody that we may never know. I was blessed to be able to spend a little time today with a lady who has history. She shared with us about people in her family are the ones that painted these murals, and I just really want to thank God for giving each one of us a gift and a talent that we're able to share with someone else. And I think on that, what I want to say is that, being a person who gets asked to speak a lot in this program is not maybe what it looks like to people who have never had the opportunity to do this. This is not something that I ever thought or dreamed of would be what God wanted me to do. I can remember hearing my first tape in a car from a woman that is Doreen P. from Washington. And I remember listening to this tape, and that cynical part of me, because when I came here I was still using, and that very cynical, hopeless part of me found every reason to listen, and it touched my heart. But the mentality, the brain that I lived with at that time, that I appreciate so much today, that brain told me, this is not real. This is not true. This is somebody who's just trying to entertain somebody. That envious part of me that was my character defect, that jealous part of me. Somebody else getting some attention and admiration from someone else. And as much as I sat there and listened and wanted to believe That disease part of me would not let me believe. And I was mandated to come to NA meetings. And I don't mean by a judge or a court, but I mean by a person who was tired of watching me die and who had a certain piece of my life in her hands. I had a methadone counselor who was tired of watching me kill myself even while I was somewhere supposedly trying to get help. And she gave me an ultimatum to come to Narcotics Anonymous. She told me that she didn't expect me to get clean. That was not her expectation, but she had seen people come in here and come out differently. And she was not in recovery. She was not part of this program, so to speak, like we are. But she identified with being on the, what I call earth people side of it, people who cared about us and lived with us and loved us and who were affected by our disease and who God had given the gift and the desire to help us. And she gave me some words that changed my life. And I came in here kicking and screaming because I was the kind of person, and still am sometimes, that even when somebody tells me something that's for my good or offers me something better, if it's different and if they say I have to do it, I don't want to do it. And as much as I'll go ahead and try, I drag my feet, the process gets aborted and slowed down, but somehow through God's mercy and grace, I end up where He wants me to end up. And I ended up in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, still using. I'm grateful that there was nobody there that told me I couldn't be there because I was still using. There were people in here who knew what would happen if I just showed up. And after a couple of months, my motive changed for why I was here. You know, I didn't know anything about character defects at that time. I didn't know anything that there was anything defected about me. I just really believed that because I came from this kind of family and because I had to learn how to become a drug addict, I had to learn how to become a prostitute, I had to learn how to steal from people, I had to learn how to put on a face that was different from what I was feeling inside. I really believed that I didn't belong here anyway, that it was somebody else's fault. And if I could just either through therapy or psychiatrists or psychologists or social workers, if I could just kind of find out whose fault it was, then I could figure out the answer on how I could get out of this. It was never, you know, I can't even honestly say that I thought I had a drug problem. I kind of knew that it was deeper than a drug problem because I had had a lot of problems even before I picked up any drugs. You know, I was never the kind of person who conformed, even though I wanted to be just like everybody else. I was what I called myself and labeled myself as this Leo child. At that time, I really had blonde hair and green eyes, and I just saw myself as this lioness who was kind of like out of step with everybody else in the jungle, you know, and I was waiting for somebody to tell me how to get in step, but I was hoping nobody else noticed that I was out of step. I wanted somebody to notice that I was alive, but I didn't want anybody to know that I was dying inside. And when I picked up my first drug, which was alcohol, it took me someplace, not really that I wanted to be, but it helped me justify who I had already become. It helped me to justify why I didn't fit in. It helped me to justify the behavior that I was already starting to show, the irresponsibility, not showing up. See, and I didn't know that that's what words I could put to it then, because I had already learned from the time I was a little kid not to let anybody know how I felt. And by the time I was 15 years old and picked up this first chemical, I had already learned how not to even feel what I felt. So it wasn't a hard job hiding what I felt. I learned not to cry. My father told me only punks cry. He didn't care if his kids were boys or girls. He told me never to let anybody in on what my secrets were. He told me never to trust anybody with anything, that when I walked away from them, I would lose sleep about what they were going to do with it. So I learned how to lock everything inside, and I learned how especially to lock in all the secrets that happened in my family. And what that did was kind of like convinced me that what was happening outside my family, there was something wrong with that. That what was happening in here was a normal kind of thing. Because God knows somehow I didn't want to say that it was my fault. I mean, I think I kind of knew that like other people had a better kind of life or a different kind of life than what I was living. But I was ashamed. I was already ashamed to let anybody know. When I came into Narcotics Anonymous, it took me I'll tell you, it took me, I came in here talking about God, but I think it took me at least 2 years in this program to really believe that I had a right to the God of my understanding. I can remember being 5 years old and already feeling doomed. What possibly could a 5-year-old little girl have ever done to feel like she was already doomed? Already feel like you're less than, and no matter how much somebody told me how cute I was, how smart I was, that somehow inside I really believed that I was never going to be anything. So when I became something other than what people told me I could become, when I became the person whose whole life centered around using and finding ways and means to use, it really wasn't a shock to me. For a long time I shared about it was a surprise that I woke up in a shooting gallery somewhere with a spike in my arm. And it was a big shock to me that one day I looked and I had no place left in my body to shoot dope. It was a shock to me when so much of my years from the time I was 20 on till the time I was 37 years old, that most of my time was spent in some kind of institution. I said I was surprised. I said I was surprised because this wasn't where I was supposed to end up. But somewhere inside, when I look back in retrospect, that was really where I expected to be. I can remember when I was a little kid, I was talking to somebody this weekend about how we still sometimes, when there's joyous times going on and happy times, positive times, times of accomplishment, times of intimacy, and times of like feeling complete and whole, how sometimes I can kind of minimize those times and push them aside. But when there's times of pain and struggle and trial and tribulation and suffering and growing and all that stuff, I don't minimize that. Like I'm right there and I'm living in it and I can share it and I can go to meetings and talk about it. And I told the woman that I was sharing with today that one of the things that I learned since I've been here is that God will reveal to me exactly what I need to know when I'm ready to handle it. And one day, I mean out of nowhere, I remembered my mother telling me when I was a little kid, I came from a big family and we were a very big poor family. And we were taught that we had enough kids to make our own baseball team, that we didn't need anybody else. We didn't need anybody else. See, I didn't know at the time that really that was the way of kind of keeping other people out so nobody knew what was happening in this family. I didn't know that. All I really thought was that we're better than. So when I came in here and you told me that addicts are people who feel better than and less than at the same time, I identified with that. I identified with already knowing how to put on a mask and hold my head up very high and look you straight in the eyes when really I couldn't see you. When really I felt like I needed to walk around with my head hanging all the time, always looking at the ground. And sometimes when I catch myself now walking, thinking, or even just praying as I'm walking and I'm looking at the ground, I'll pick my head up real fast. And I remember my mother telling me, we were playing and roughhousing one day because even the girls were tomboys. We were all taught to be strong. We were taught to compensate for what we didn't have. Some of those things were positive things, and some of those things are things I still carry today. But I've had to learn how to discern through this program and the steps of what stuff I needed to cast aside, that it was misinformation, that it was people who gave me what they had and they were giving me the best they had because it was all that they were given. But there were some things that even if it was the best they could give me, it was the wrong stuff to give me. And I had to unlearn a whole lot of stuff. And I remember my mom telling us one day, I couldn't have been more than 11 years old, and I didn't remember this until I was clean about 4 or 5 years, wondering, why is it that I can't appreciate the good times? Why is it when there's so much joy and so much to be grateful for, that when those times come, I can share about it right then and I can shed tears of joy, but then immediately I'm already in this doomsday syndrome, I better not feel too good because I know what's coming next. And you know what? Pain does come. But today I appreciate the times when it's just peaceful and quiet. I appreciate the times that I don't have to live on the edge to get that adrenaline rush. I appreciate the times that I'm able to stay out of the trap because sniffing around the trap has always been a high for me. Always planning on how I could get in there and kind of get out unhurt. And then always understanding that the insanity for me was that I knew I was going to get in there and I knew I was going to get out. But I always convinced myself that I could handle the pain and the scars when they came. I remember my mother at 11 years old saying to me, "You know, when you kids laugh and play this much, you're only bound to end up crying afterwards." And somehow as a kid, that kind of got like ingrained in me that you better not laugh too much, because this is what happens. I didn't understand that laughter is part of life, crying is part of life, living is part of life, dying is part of life, holding on, letting go, growing up, being a little kid, all that is part of life. Pain, love, respect, I didn't know anything about that. When I went back to school, I was about 6 years clean. And I remember being in one of my classes in the university, and they taught me a word that I sat there and I thought, God, this is a word I can use when I share. Everybody will identify with this. And the word was hedonistic. And I found out that being a hedonist meant that my life revolved around seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And this philosophy class that I was in at this university was kind of like the discussion, the very intellectual discussion, which I always could fit into an intellectual bullshit discussion. You know, there was never an end to it, so nobody ever really knew what you knew or what you didn't know as long as you could talk real well. And that's always been my gift. And I remember sitting there thinking, what they're teaching me is that most people live like that, not just addicts. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This is an ordinary thing. Why do I feel like that just because I'm an addict, that it's wrong to seek out the joyful times, that I think it's wrong to avoid pain? Why is it that I can't just accept that life includes both? Well, when I came into Narcotics Anonymous, I didn't know that it was going to be a journey for me to learn about those things. And since I've been here, there have been a whole lot of times that I really just wanted to take control of everything once again and say, don't you all know that I really have the answer? I just needed you to get me on my feet for a minute so I could figure it out. And I thank God that all of you had thought the same way as I did, so you didn't tell me you don't belong here. In 1985, I was forced to go to my first Narcotics Anonymous program, and I share this because I am not a newcomer, and I don't believe I have a newcomer message anymore, but I believe it's my responsibility to share with people with the understanding that the newcomer is still the most important person here. So although my message may have changed because now I have a whole lot of experiences and a lot of more understanding, it may not sound like anything that a lot of you will understand. See, I know there's people in here who will understand what I share tonight. There's people in here who won't understand what I share tonight. And there's people in here who will just understand later. And that's the way it is. And that's why I keep coming back. At the end of 1985, I was forced to go to my first Narcotics Anonymous program. I went to meetings with works in my pocketbook, and that's what we called them then, pocketbooks, not purses. I went to meetings with works on me, even though they read things like, we ask you not to come here with drugs or paraphernalia. That did not seem like anything that applied to me. I sat in the back of the room. I put no money in the basket because I really believed that the people that were sitting at the table had just found a way to get other stupid dope fiends to give them money so they could go use. I really believed this. I was what they call a hope to die, hopeless drug addict. I didn't believe that there was any way out. I believed that at 37 years old that there was no hope for me, that I had tried everything possible to stop using. I had tried religion, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. I had been going to treatment facilities, and back then in the early 70s, treatment facilities were not 30 days or 45 days. Treatment programs were 12 to 18 to 24 months. I had been in more of them than I had been on the street, trying to stop using. See, I really never was somebody who had a whole lot of courage for a whole lot of pain. From the time I started using, I was crying help and trying to find a way out. Today, I really believe that the process for each one of us is different. For some of us, it takes a long time. For some of us, it takes a short time. I've come to understand lately that there are some people who are called to carry a message in this way. And people may call it being on the circuit. I call it being on the right path for the first time in my life. I call it I call it finding out whatever God's talent that He's given me and trying to cultivate it. When people ask me, are you still nervous before you do this? I said, yes, but I'm not afraid. It's not a fearful nervous. It's an excited nervous. It's always still that thing that like, well, maybe I just won't be as good as I was some other time. But I really do believe today that if you get asked to do something that many times by that many different people, then maybe, just maybe, this is really what God wants you to do. You know, and instead of fighting it, and instead of saying, like, why me? Why me? Because I still ask myself that sometimes. When I go to a convention and I open a program and my name's in it, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. I don't know whether, like, one day you're all going to wake up and say, hi, we made a mistake. I just don't know. I know that a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine in Buffalo was telling me how scary it felt to believe that God had chosen him to carry a message. And I said, you know what I've come to like start to look at? I don't know if it's right or not, but I believe that God knows what each one of us needs. Each one of us needs. He gives us a talent. Some of us, He gives many talents. And it's just my job to find out what it is He gives me and to try to make the very best out of it, to try to do it in the very best way possible. I've been sharing at conventions since I was 3 years clean. I have been probably every place. Places that I could never have afforded to go. I have been to places that I couldn't afford to go that I had to pay to go to carry a message. I have been to places that like where I had to sleep was not real comfortable. The drive was not real comfortable. Maybe I didn't even have enough money to buy a whole lot of food. Maybe I didn't have enough money to do anything. But I want to tell you guys that the one experience that I had in all these years, sometimes standing up in front of thousands of addicts who would stand up and give me standing ovations. I remember when I was 4 years clean and I was asked to go into a locked unit, Norristown State Hospital, for the criminally insane. And they had a unit there for people who used drugs and alcohol or who were incarcerated and who were what the courts had classified as insane. All of them were heavily medicated. They had us in a room that was so hot, they had these huge fans in the back of the room. The fans made so much noise that I had to literally scream to hear myself. There was more people that came with me than there were at the meeting. They were all heavily drugged. There was about 5 men and 2 women, and all the men, in spite of the drugs, just stood there and stared at the 2 women. Nobody shared when it was over, except the people that came with me. Nobody shared except them. Nobody stood up and clapped for me when I was done except the people that I came with. There was a guard sitting in the back of the room. When I left that meeting, I knew for the first time that I was in the right place at the right time for the right reason, and that as long as I showed up at the right place when God wanted me to be there for the right reason, that it didn't matter if anybody ever clapped. It didn't matter if anybody ever came up afterwards and thanked me, that all I was supposed to do was go in and tell you that the only way I could go from being this to being this was that God loved me enough, and He looked down one day and He said, it's enough, and I have something else I want you to do. I understand today why I'm standing here. I understand why God has allowed me to recover a gift of articulation. When I came in this program, my whole vocabulary consisted of profanity. And I was so loud because I just wanted somebody to know I was there. I needed somebody to know that I existed, that I felt like I was dying and I didn't really want to die, even though there were days that I wished I was dead. There were more mornings that I woke up and wished I could be somebody else, anybody else, other than being me. I know why I'm here. So when I say that I don't have a newcomer message, I know that there's newcomers in here who will understand when I tell you that I know why I'm here. And when I came here, I didn't know why I was here. Today I know. I know that I'm just supposed to stand up here and tell you that without God in my life, even when I didn't know there was one, without Him in my life, without bringing me to the program in Narcotics Anonymous, without allowing me to suffer through some very hard times here, without teaching me that God doesn't come at the beginning of the storm. God comes usually when I'm about 3/4 of the way through. And the reason that he does that was because if he came and spared me from ever feeling any pain, I would never be able to stand up here and tell you, you can make it to the other side too. I thank God that, like, when I was telling somebody this weekend, Sharita was telling me about the joy and blessing of this house and how, that she and her husband have found, and how the journey that they went on and all the different houses that they saw that they thought they wanted, and all this. I hope you don't mind me sharing about this. And how we stood afterwards and agreed that the real blessing was that we knew it was something else happening. It's not even about the house. It's not even about the job that I have today. It's not even about the little car that I have at home. It's not even about the little bit of jewelry. It's not even about being able to be a Narcotics Anonymous servant. It's not about that. It's knowing why I'm here. It's knowing that it's not me. You know, I'll tell you, just briefly, I want to tell you that when I hear people in here tell other people, no matter what happens, you don't have to use, a lot of times, folks, the people that are saying that are not the people who have experienced the no matter what yet. They're sharing the hope with you that somebody else has given them. And a lot of times they're trying to remind themselves of it. Because at some point you know the way life is. Life sometimes just serves you dishes that are hard to swallow. Life sucks sometimes. But I absolutely know that as long as I do what I've learned to do here, that I'm going to be able to get through it without using. And I know that a lot of times when I said to people, you don't have an excuse to use anymore. No matter what, you don't have to use. I didn't know that I hadn't experienced the no matter what yet. I really thought that after like 23 years of addiction, most of it injecting drugs in my body, most of it hurting myself, most of it waking up with some kind of a sexually transmitted disease, some kind of degradation, humiliation, becoming somebody that I never dreamed I would become. I never dreamed that I would be a whore. I never dreamed that. I never dreamed that I would have to learn how to sell myself to somebody. I don't know about anybody else, but I had to learn how to do that. Nobody taught me how to do that. Nobody taught me, Jackie, this is what you're supposed to become. A person who sits down in some abandoned house somewhere with no windows in it, where people have defecated in the bathtub, the sink, and the toilet so much that the whole house stinks, but you can't smell it anymore, where there's no running water, no lights, and all you can think about is, God, help me get a hit. All I could think about was where I'm going to get the next one, how am I going to get this one in me. Nobody could have told me that that's where I was going to be. But when I ended up there, I really wasn't surprised. And I came here, and you told me what they had told me from the time I was a kid. You can be all that you can be. You can be all you ever dreamed of being. But you have to learn first how to stick and stay here. You have to learn how to sit still. It was impossible for me to sit still at a 90-minute meeting. I couldn't sit still. First of all, one of the things that I share about today is I love women. I love women in this program. Women are the people who I didn't trust. I didn't want to be around. I felt less than all of them. I didn't care if I looked better, had more. I always felt inadequate around them. Women were the ones that I could look at them and see me, so I knew that they could look at me and see them. And I knew that they could look at me and know who I really was. And I can remember being at my first meetings and doing what I always did because that's all I knew how to do. And I couldn't sit still at a meeting, and I wanted somebody to give me some attention. And I always thought I had kind of like a cute little butt anyway, and I would get up and make 15 trips to the coffee table. 15 trips at least, and I don't drink coffee. So somebody would see. So somebody would notice. And it took women in this program to teach me If that's all you think you have, that's all you're going to get. Is that all you want? It took men in this program who loved me enough, who didn't want to use me or hurt me, who had grown spiritually enough where they didn't need somebody else to fill a void for them, to teach me some things about me. And when I told you earlier that my motives for coming here changed, even though I didn't know anything about what they said character defects were, I learned real fast. And I learned that I was probably more defective than anybody else in the room. And I learned that all the little girl image and all the little innocent thing and all the little like I don't really know when I really thought I knew more than all of you anyway, all the little helpless like shuffling around and walking back and forth, that really wasn't me. I really was trying to set you up. And I would cry about thinking you wanted to set me up. And what I've learned since then is that I'm probably the person who used more people than had ever used me. So when I cried about men using women and 13-stepping women, I had to look at my first 18 months in this program and remember how many innocent people I hurt. I really thought that freedom meant that I could sleep with anybody that I wanted to. I really did. I really thought that as long as I'm not using, I can do anything I want to do. I didn't know anything about hurting somebody else. I really didn't understand this disease. I lived with the reservation that I could do this and not use. And at 2 years clean, but only by God's grace, when I woke up and wanted to shoot dope, I knew that there had to be some very big changes in my life. I just moved from Philadelphia to Buffalo last year. And I jump around sometimes, just wherever it comes, I'm going to share it with you. I moved from Philadelphia to Buffalo last year. And when I moved to Buffalo, I moved there to be with a man I had been in a long-distance relationship with. It's about 430 miles away. And I left everything that I was familiar with, my job, a very good job, my house that I own. I rented it out to another recovering addict. Took my dog, my bird, all my belongings in a U-Haul truck and moved my stuff. And after I got there, I was in a meeting in Buffalo, and it was a first step meeting. And when I got there, there were people who were calling me, women that were calling me, men that would like see me at meetings that had heard tapes. These people really didn't know me. They only knew what they'd heard on tapes. And they reached out for me. And somehow, I found out that there was no women in the entire city who had as much time as I did. And there were only maybe 1 or 2 men that did. So somehow that better than and less than thing that I still live with, I don't know if you do. My insecurities sometimes will send me off into a spiel of that I really know more than other people. I mean, sometimes, I told Ben this weekend, sometimes what I'm looking at today is that sometimes I really think I'm smarter than a lot of people. That I think faster than most people. Maybe I'm not smarter, but I just get there faster than most people. And my impatience with people is a character defect that I'm just starting to notice, and I'm asking God to help me with, because it doesn't feel good, and it's dangerous. And I sat there in this meeting, and they were reading step 1 from It Works How and Why. And I remember sitting there thinking, I wish they'd hurry up and finish reading this step so I could share on it. I know they don't really know. This is a very young, recovering community, and it looks like there's some people here from rehabs and stuff, so I have to let them know what step 1 is about. Well, God in his infinite wisdom, who knows me really well, they got to this certain part, and I swear to God, as many times as I've read this, I didn't remember reading this. It says, while abstinence is the beginning, our only hope for recovery is a profound emotional and spiritual change. Now, the way I read that, it just sounds kind of like routine, doesn't it? Well, let me go back here. It says, while abstinence is the beginning, our only hope. It doesn't say one of the ways. It doesn't say one of the, our only hope, and it doesn't say here is a change. I've heard that since I came in the door. It says a profound, doesn't say a profound message. You know, God has gifted a whole lot of us to be able to stand up here and carry a profound message. A message of spirituality and a message of recovery and a message of God. And then when we stand off this podium, how we live doesn't match with what we say. A whole lot of us. Well, let me tell you something. For so many years, I have lived in the resentment that I couldn't do it because God wouldn't let me do it. From the time I started coming up here, whatever I shared, I knew I had to live that way or God was going to take the message from me. And I found that out by doing what dope fiends do. I stood up here and lied one time. I lied. I told people, I shared, and as harmless as I thought it was, as much as I convinced myself that I was helping somebody else, a lie is a lie. And what I shared is that I had been celibate from any sexual activity for like 90 days. I think I wanted to be able to say that. I had just got up out of bed with somebody that afternoon before I went to this commitment. And I stood there and I thought to myself, this will help so many people. People know how hard this is for me, so if I can do this, they can do this. Let me tell you what happened. The next time somebody asked me to speak at a meeting, I got up there and nothing would come out. Nothing would come out. And the friend that I was telling you about this week in Buffalo, we were talking about being Narcotics Anonymous speakers. I told him, I said, you know what I finally realized? That God knows what each one of us needs. And there are some of us who are so sick that we need to stand up here and be so visible and expose ourselves so much so that everybody in Narcotics Anonymous will know who we are. So there is no place I can go and slime, no place I can go and hide, no place I can keep any secrets. Because left up to my own devices at 11 years clean, I can still be a sneak. That is one of my biggest character defects. Even if I'm doing something that's not really wrong. There's something, a rush I get from sneaking. Hiding someplace, doing something. Do you understand? Yeah, I know you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, I was waiting for them to finish, and when they got to that part, and then they finished reading this step, I had nothing to say. I sat there at this meeting and I listened to them. Because I knew the reason I was at that meeting was for me to hear, right then and there. Now that was in around October of last year. I had moved to Buffalo in July. And what I want to share with you and why I say I don't have a newcomer message, well, come to think of it, a lot of the stuff that happens to me is still stuff that was going on even when I first came here. I handle it differently. I learn from it differently. But the one thing I still do is I come in here and I tell you. One thing I do is still let people know that even with 11 years clean, there is insanity that comes into your life. And do you know the reason that I do this? Is because my experience getting over so many places in this country, I am seeing people in this program with time who are dying, who are staying in the rooms, staying clean, but are dying. I am also seeing people with time leaving the rooms and using and dying. And I'm trying to understand why, on one hand, I see people with time who are realizing that they still have this void, this empty spot, so they're going deeper and trying to build a deeper relationship with God. And then there's some of us over here who have this void, this empty spot, this bottomless pit that they talk about in our basic text, who are not doing that, who have gotten to a point in their recovery where they really believe that what they have that means more than anything is what you think of them, the image of who they are in Narcotics Anonymous. That to lose anything would be better than losing who you think I am. It's not the same as respect. My image is not the same thing as respect. There are people with image who intimidate people. People are afraid of them. They don't respect them. They're afraid of them and intimidated by them. There are people who are respected because of who you think they are. You don't know that these are the same people going home and living in very quiet desperation, who have been around here long enough to know that they're dying, but can't come in here and tell you, I'm in trouble, help me. You know, I told you all that I have certain things that I read before I come here. And one of the books that I read happens to be the book of the faith that I follow today. And there's a particular chapter in this book that I read time and time again because someone else who is a Narcotics Anonymous speaker suggested that I read it. And in this chapter, God is telling this servant of his that he has to go somewhere and he has to carry a message to people. And he has to tell people that they're killing each other, that they're destroying each other from within, and that they're doomed if they don't do something different. And he tells this servant of his, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the people. Go and tell them. Because if you're afraid to tell them, I'll make you afraid before God. I don't want to be afraid before God. I believe that there's something after this. And when I get there, I want to be able to go in and say, I did what you wanted me to do. I did the best job I could do. Whoever you believe in is God. I have a right to the God of my understanding. And that's what I believe. And when he tells me that I have to come and tell you, you have people in your life that you're close to who are dying with ram because you don't have the courage to tell them. You don't have the courage to tell them, I see you killing yourself and others. Because you don't have the courage. Because you're afraid to lose their respect or their friendship. I know because I've been that person. I've been the person who people have been afraid to come to, and I've been the person who have been afraid to go to my friends and tell them, you can't keep living like you're living and stay here. Some of you can keep living like you're living and stay here. I don't know if I'd want to. A profound emotional and spiritual change. I knew right then that God was trying to tell me something. I was in a relationship with a man that I loved more than sunshine, one that I knew I was not supposed to be with. Listen, I've been there before. I know what the voice inside feels like and sounds like. God has given me that over these 11 years. There is no more an opportunity for me to say, I didn't hear the voice. Now I have to own that I hear the voice and have made a different decision not to listen to it. There is no way. Now at the beginning I could say I didn't understand if it was God's will or if it was my will or if it was your will, if it was the right thing, the wrong thing. All I knew how to do what I'd always done, so I didn't know what else I was supposed to do. Today I can't say that anymore. And every night when I would pray, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that the reason I was supposed to be there was because of anything about him. Anything that was going on in that relationship, I shared with somebody. But the bottom line was, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there before I went there. And I went anyway. My beliefs, my convictions told me, you're not supposed to do this, Jackie. And I went anyway. I went anyway and I negotiated with God. I negotiated on the forgiving heart that God has. I took advantage of that. I knew he'd forgive me because he'd always forgiven me. And in spite of doing what I wasn't supposed to do, God continued to bless me. Every night I would be on my knees and I would pray, God, please help me. Help remove any obstacle that's between you and I. When we pray only for God's will and the courage and the power to carry it out, please be careful when you pray for that. Don't just make it a ritual. Don't make it a ritual. My experience tells me that God's will may very well be the exact opposite of what I want it to be. But I knew, even while I was praying, 10.5 years clean, down on my knees, God, please remove any obstacle between me and you. See, when you've never had a connection with a higher power, that's one thing. And you feel the void, you feel the emptiness. But once you've had it and you've lost it, it's a very deep void, very, very painful feeling. And I knew that's where I was. I knew I couldn't justify anything anymore, and I was afraid. I didn't want to be that lost. And in my prayer, I knew what God was going to do. I knew, because I knew what His will was. I knew His will was not for me to be living with someone that I wasn't married to. And here I was. I set up house. This is my man. I'm his woman. This is my address. This is our phone number. This is us. We're a we. We walked into this house and prayed and asked God to bless this house, knowing that it was not the right thing to do. We had had many discussions about, do we think that this is really the right thing to do? I knew that if God knocked on my door, I could probably convince Him that because how much I loved Him, it was okay that I was there. But that once He hit my bedroom door, there was nothing I could convince Him of. I knew it wasn't right. And I'm not trying to impose this on anybody else. And believe me, this is not a conviction that I've always had. This is not one that I always wanted to accept was mine. I pray today for the courage and strength to follow that. That's my conviction. That's more than a belief. This is one that I know that I will die a spiritual death if I don't listen to what God wants me to do. And when I prayed, I knew what the outcome was going to be because I knew what God's will was. I just didn't have the courage to do it. And little by little, God gave me the courage to end this relationship. And I left. And what happened after I left was I went and stayed with somebody else in Buffalo for 4 days. I ended up making the decision to go back to my apartment, not to be with him. From that point on, from Thanksgiving Day, this happened 4 days before Thanksgiving, on Thanksgiving Day, from Thanksgiving Day until now, the process that God has taken this addict through, I thank Him every day for. I have learned more about what humility really is. I have learned more about being able to ask God to just be in my life. I feel like I have gotten so close this time that I feel like I'm standing there like I'm so close like I could feel God's breath on me. And I know it's because I'm being obedient and I'm doing what He wants me to do. I know that that's part of it. But what I want to tell you is that one of the things I learned when I first came into this program, the self-centered addict that I am, I wanted to pick out the pieces that I knew I needed to use later down the road. And I heard people say something like, if you're not humble, you'll be humiliated. So the addict that I am, I figured what that meant was, as long as I'm humble, I will never be humiliated. So every time I was humiliated in recovery, I just figured it was because I wasn't humble. I really didn't know how to be humble. Today, my experience that I want to share with you is that people like us, people like me, I am not going to be humble unless I'm humiliated. Unless the pain gets great enough, then I'm willing to surrender. And what I had to do was I had to go through a whole process, even though I had made the decision to end this relationship. This man is very well known in the area, got almost as much time as me, well loved by people. I'm an outsider. Even the women that are in my life have history with him, friendships, relationships, whatever. I felt so alone, like I couldn't trust anyone. And during this period, this last 6 months, what God allowed me to do was to be broken completely once again so He could build me back up. I spent so much time in this apartment crying out to Him, to ask Him to show me, why am I here? Somehow I knew that even though I had made the decision against God's will to move in with this man, that somehow He had me there for a reason. That if God had knocked on my door in Philadelphia and said, my child, my will is for you to go to Buffalo, New York, by the time I finished laughing or crying, I would have asked Him, are you sure you haven't made a mistake and read the orders wrong? I'm supposed to go someplace that's warm, not colder. I knew God had me there for a reason. It's not done yet, but I will share with you this, that in this last 6 months, I have come to understand at the deepest level what harm is. Something really simple, 11 years clean. I have worked 12 steps in my life. I found out in this last 6 months that this ongoing process that gets deeper and deeper, that's just what it does. I found myself wanting to run. I found myself wanting to pick up everything and move back to Philadelphia. And somehow, God told me, don't leave before the miracle happens. I wanted to run, y'all. I wanted to go back to the people who validated me, the people who loved me and respected me. And a person that I consider very spiritual said, Jackie, you're at a point in your life where you have to be validated by the God inside of you, not by others outside of you. It doesn't matter what city, what address. A traveling addict? I've been a traveling person my whole life. I always ran from one place to another. Geographical changes, relationship changes, any job changes. I never stayed any place long enough to get a promotion. And I always felt like I was supervisor material. But whenever anything got just a little rough, I found a reason to go. Even when they would give me raises and more responsibility and validate me, I couldn't stay still. I couldn't show up. I had to move. Getting too close was scary for me. At 11 years clean, I'm just starting to understand that the reason people who have come into my life are people who don't know about intimacy is because those are the people that I've chosen. And not because I really want to teach them how to be intimate. Not because I really want to get on this mission to teach them how to love me and love themselves, because I am so afraid to really allow somebody to get that close. I don't like standing up here saying that. I don't like saying that all the people who think I'm loving and caring and spiritual and good-hearted and kind and all, you just don't know sometimes. I don't want to be those things. I don't want people to want to get close to me. Getting close means you get hurt. That's my experience. I made a decision finally at 48 years old to stand still in a town where I knew no one. Put my feet down, put my roots down, and just ask God to be there with me. At the end of January, I found myself, I came home from work one night and went to school, came home from school, went to put my dog out for the night, to go outside, take care of his little business for the night, and my dog was sick. And some of you have heard me share about my dog. He was 13 years old and he was my baby. And to make a long story short, I ended up having to rush him to an emergency vet, and I had to make a decision on the spot to put him to sleep. And I walked in my house, and I walked back in my apartment, and I stepped over his bed, and I remember stepping over his bed like he was still in it, and sitting down on the sofa, and crying so hard. And it wasn't just that I missed him. I was angry at God. I was angry at this man. I was angry at everybody in Narcotics Anonymous. I was angry at everybody who had ever left me in my life. I was angry at everybody. And I just sat there and cried. And one of the little gifts that God gave me is a 17-year-old parrot that I've had for 15 years. And he was underneath his covers, and he heard me crying, and he started sending me kisses. And I opened up the cover, and I sat there and looked at him, and I realized that God was still there with me. That I was in the right place. I just had to stand still. It took me 2 days to really understand that once again, God had done for me exactly what he knew I was going to need to be done. About 30 days before I had to put my dog to sleep, they had asked me to come to Columbus to speak at a convention, and I actually considered not going because he was sick. And a friend of mine there made arrangements for me to bring him with me and bring her to her house. I really believe that on January 31st, what God said to me was, he means more to you than anything. Give him back to me so I can take good care of him, because I have something that I need you to do again. You can't be worried about him. You have to go do what I want you to do. And all I'd ever asked is, God, just show me what you want me to do. Where is it you want me to be? Who is it you want me to talk to? Who is it you want me to hug? I stopped asking God, why are you taking things from me? I started asking him, what are you trying to give me? Where is it you want me to be? I only want to do your will. Just show me what it is you want me to do. I come out here to the most beautiful spot that I've been to in a long time. I feel God here. I feel like every time I share, I'm supposed to let people know that no matter what, you don't have to use. Today I can tell you that I've been through a lot of the no matter whats. My brother died when I was 4 years clean. My marriage ended when I was 4.5 years clean. My mother died when I was almost 5 years clean, all in 9 months' time. I didn't have to use. I didn't use. People were there for me. People loved me, and they held me up. And in spite of that, I was still afraid. I moved and left everybody that I loved and trusted, and I came someplace. I had to make another painful decision to end a relationship with a man that I still love, that I still care about. I didn't have to use. I haven't used. And not only have I been able to be abstinent from drugs, I can tell you that I really honestly, believe me, have been abstinent from other things too. And it's been a real process for me just to still know why I'm here. I don't know if I'm really supposed to say anything else right this moment. I think basically just standing up here and telling people that if you don't know why you're here, find out why you're here. There is a reason why you're here, and it's not just to stay clean. It's not just to enjoy life because you're clean. You know, there's a responsibility that comes with this. You know, being a newcomer, maybe we have the privilege, you know, and maybe we have the, just the privilege and the opportunity to sit back and let other people love us till we learn how to love ourselves. But once you're a member of Narcotics Anonymous and you accept all the gifts of Narcotics Anonymous, I saw somebody walking around here with a t-shirt on that said, "Freedom is not free." None of this is free. None of this. You know, when people told me that I'm only here by the grace of God, I really thought that meant that all the pain I did earned me this seat here. The grace means it's an unmerited favor. Nothing I did earned this. I don't deserve this. Today, I'm still trying to earn the right and the privilege for this life. Today, I still keep asking God, what is it you want me to do? Okay, I have to go through this in order to grow some more. I have found out that love is unconditional, relationships are not. They're based on trust and respect. If trust and respect is not there, chances are the love is not there, and there won't be anything unconditional about it. I've learned that the most unconditional love I have to show has got to be for me. In the last 6 months, I found out what harm really is, and not because I was hurt. I had to start looking at the harm I was imposing on others. It's hard as hell when somebody has hurt you, for you to stand still and say, what is my part in this? What did I do? That doesn't mean that I accept responsibility for how someone else abused or hurt me. It means I have to look at how did I put myself in that position in the first place? Why did I stay long after it was time to say this is enough and I'm gone? How did I react to the harm? Hurt people hurt people. Most people, when they're hurt somebody back. Addicts do. I've always tried to find somebody else to blame for everything that was happening in my life. I could never stand still and say, Jackie, maybe you're not to blame for the hurt that you felt, but maybe you need to empower yourself by looking at how did you get in this position in the first place? What is it about you that has to change? This is nothing foreign. This is stuff that I've heard from day one. Why does it take me 11 years to be in a place where I feel so alone that there's nobody but God to reach out to? Because that's the way it happens. When you're alone and there's nobody else to blame, nobody else to look at, nobody else to rescue you and pick you up and dust you off, and you cry out, and then there seems like there's only more pain. If nothing else, after all this, I know God is real. I know He's real. I actually made a decision to sign another year lease in this apartment. This was not my plan. But 11 years ago, when I asked God to please help me to become the best person I could be, I didn't know that that meant he wasn't going to just reach down and make me this great person. I didn't know that it was going to take a lot of pain, it was going to take a lot of work, that faith was going to come from when I messed up, God was still there, and that most of you still were too. Some of you weren't. I didn't know that I was going to have to look at, this is what happened to me. I was in my apartment, and I was actually thinking, why are you thinking about running back home? Why are you thinking about going back to Philadelphia? And I had to be honest with me. I didn't know if I could be honest with you, but I can today. I thought about all the other women that had been in his life, that I compared myself to, that I felt inadequate to. Some of these women had relapsed. Some of these women had used. I mean, some of these women, you know what I mean? A lot of them didn't have anything going for me like I did. But somehow I still felt less than. That insecure part of me that never feels as good as. And I was afraid. I was afraid of walking into a meeting and seeing him with somebody else and feeling like a failure or less than again. And you know what God gave me? God started helping me to look at each one of those women that I was so afraid of and realize that they were just like me. And realize that when they were hurt, they didn't run. Yes, some of them used, some of them did this, some of them used men, some of this happened, and I was standing up to think, but I didn't do any of that. I'm better than that. I didn't get wiped out like they did. I have God in my life, and I have all these years clean, and this is why. And God brought me to a point to start looking at what harm I had caused them. I was so worried about walking into a meeting and seeing him with one of them. I started remembering how they must have felt when I hit town and they saw me in meetings with him. I started respecting and appreciating the fact that no matter what they had felt, they didn't move. They didn't run. The one that had used is back in the rooms and has 5 years clean. They were able to do what they needed to do. And I knew that I needed to stay. I couldn't let my fears let me run out of there. I have people in my life there who love me and trust me and respect me. I have women in my life there, friends there. I have a good job there. I'm in school there, just like I was in Philadelphia. I call home to Philadelphia and cry when I talk to my friends. Sometimes I still think about going back. But what I do is I make arrangements for the lawn at my apartment to get cut, and I sign another lease for another year. I plan on showing up at my job because they're giving me a raise and a bonus. I've registered for another semester at school. I think about running, but I don't run. I still think about using sometimes, but I don't use. People, places, or things. Thanks for letting me share.